My sister used a spare key to illegally move into my home with her 3 kids, claiming, "You don't need all this space." So I called the cops and had them all thrown out that same day. So I used a spare key, which led to me calling the police to have them removed. Greetings, Reddit. I'm Charlotte, 32, from Texas, and it feels like my entire life has unfolded in the shadow of my older sister, Ella. She's 3 years my senior and was always the favored one. You know, the intelligent, outgoing type who could talk her way out of anything. I, on the other hand, was the responsible one, which seems to be code for the person who does all the work and gets no credit. Growing up, Ella always had the best of everything. Her birthdays were huge outdoor events with bouncy castles and pony rides. Mine, a pizza party in the dining room with a grocery store cake. Christmas, Ella received a Barbie dream house. I got a used knockoff with a missing elevator. My parents would simply say, "You don't need all that fancy stuff," or "Be grateful for what you have, Charlotte." And I was. Yet, I couldn't help but notice that Ella's gratitude was never expected in the same way. The real difference became stark when I started college. I'd worked diligently in high school, balancing AP classes and extracurriculars to maintain a high GPA. I'd been accepted to a local university and thought I had a solid plan. I'd commute from home to save on dorm fees. Ella had attended her dream school, and my parents had covered everything. I assumed they'd help me too, right? Wrong. When I mentioned my plan to live at home, my mother looked at me as if I'd suggested moving to Mars. "If you're staying here, you'll need to contribute," she added casually. Ella got a full ride from us because she deserved it. "You need to learn responsibility." I was stunned. I was 18, about to start college, and they were already talking about me paying rent. Contribute ended up being $400 a month for rent and utilities, plus the requirement that I buy my own groceries. That might not sound like much, unless you're a broke college student working part-time at a bookstore for $9 an hour. I tried to argue, explaining how they'd covered everything for Ella and how she never worried about money at school. Mom simply shrugged. "We gave Ella what she needed," she said. "You're different. You're independent. You'll figure it out." So I did. I worked as many hours as possible at the bookstore, sometimes skipping meals to make ends meet. Every morning, I'd pass the campus coffee shop, envious of the students who could afford lattes and pastries. Meanwhile, I was brown bagging peanut butter and jelly sandwiches and drinking free coffee from the bookstore break room. I don't think I bought a single textbook at full price. I got all of mine used or borrowed from the library. Every month, I handed over the $400 to my parents while Ella was away at her out-of-state school, living in a brand new dorm my parents had purchased for her. She contacted me once to complain about her dorm's AC not being cold enough, and I almost lost it. I didn't even have air conditioning in my car because I couldn't afford to fix it. My parents continued to send Ella money every month. I once overheard Mom on the phone saying, "We don't want her to struggle. College is difficult enough." I stood in the kitchen, holding my $1 ramen noodles, wondering why no one had ever shown me compassion. To make matters worse, my parents were constantly praising Ella for her accomplishments. She earned a 3.2 GPA in her communications program, and they threw her a lavish graduation party complete with a catered buffet and a DJ. When I graduated with a 3.9 GPA and a computer science degree, we had a quiet meal at home. Mom made lasagna and simply said, "Well, we don't want to make a fuss." Looking back, I think what hurt the most wasn't a lack of financial assistance. The message was clear. I didn't matter as much. While I was just present, Ella was always portrayed as the star, the one with potential. Even when I achieved it, it was overlooked. "Charlotte's smart. She doesn't need help," they'd say. It seemed like being capable was a curse. After college, I moved out as quickly as possible. I rented a small apartment near my first job and began living my life on my own terms. It wasn't easy, but it felt great to be free of their expectations. I worked hard, lived frugally, and started saving. Meanwhile, Ella married Josh, whom my parents adore, despite the fact that he's constantly between jobs. They now have 3 children: Emily, 5, Mason, 4, and baby Daniel, 2. My folks are continually bailing them out. When their car broke down last year, my parents gave them money for a new one. When Ella complained about how difficult it was to keep up with 3 children, Mom and Dad offered to babysit on weekends. I wish it didn't bother me anymore, but it still does. No matter how much I do on my own, it seems like I'll always be second to Ella. That's why I no longer share many details about my life with my family. I know they wouldn't mind, not really. So I've been keeping this quiet, but I recently decided it was time to start looking for a home. I've been renting this tiny apartment for years, paying way too much for what is essentially a glorified shoebox, and I've been saving for what seems like an eternity. I eventually got to the point where I was like, you know what? I deserve this. Okay, here's the thing. I didn't tell my family. Not because it's a big secret, but because they can't simply be pleased for anyone. Everything becomes a group project with them. If I brought anything up, I knew they'd start making it about Ella and her children, and how whatever I get should help them. So I decided it was easier to keep my lips shut until all was said and done. Apparently, that was overly hopeful. I'm not sure how this happened, but a woman I work with, let's call her Lisa, managed to let it slip. Lisa is one of those people who is constantly involved in other people's lives, and I believe she casually revealed to someone that I was house hunting. That person happened to be Ella's neighbor, and the word spread like wildfire, the delights of small-town Texas. A few days later, my mother contacted me. "Charlotte," she remarked, her tone excessively pleasant. "Why didn't you tell us you're looking for a house?" I should have known better, but I chose to play dumb. "Oh, I'm just browse around right now, nothing serious." "Well, Ella and I were talking, and we have some great ideas for you. You're going to need something big enough for everyone, you know? At least 4 bedrooms for the kids, of course." "What? What children? I don't have children." She kept going as if this were the most regular thing in the world. "You'll need space for Ella's family when they visit, and for us too. Oh, and it'd be great if it was close to Ella's place." I'm not sure why I was startled. She had already turned my potential house into the solution to their issues. I said something non-committal and hung up the phone as quickly as I could, thinking it was a one-time occurrence. But oh no, it wasn't. My mom and Ella began flooding me with house listings after that. I'm not exaggerating when I say it felt like a part-time job for them. Every day, I get at least a dozen links to these crazy houses, large homes with 4 or 5 bedrooms, pools, 3-car garages, and the works. It was as if they assumed I was looking for a reality TV mansion. Mom texted once, "Did you see that one on Maple Street? It's a huge one, just perfect." Another time, Ella gave me a link to a 6-bedroom house with the following note: "This would be so suitable for us. We could finally have space to spread out." Us. I stared at the message for a good minute, wondering how my property purchase had become a collaborative endeavor. The worst part was that they weren't even attempting to pretend it was about me. Every place they recommended was oriented toward Ella's family. "This one has a finished basement. Josh could turn it into his man cave. The kids would love the pool in this one. Look, Charlotte, there's even a guest room for mom and dad when they visit." It was exhausting. At first, I attempted to gently lead them away, explaining that I was looking for something small, just for myself. But that simply made matters worse. That's when I decided to cease responding. I silenced the group chat and disregarded their messages. I assumed they would finally get the point and move on. Meanwhile, I continued searching for houses on my own. I would spend my evenings reading through Zillow and my weekends looking at open houses. I didn't tell anyone where I was going, and I avoided anything slightly related to Ella's area. I didn't want to run into anyone who might tell my mother. After weeks of looking, I finally found it. A little 2-bedroom cottage just outside the city. It has everything I desired: a nice little porch, a sunny kitchen, and a lawn large enough for gardening. It wasn't elegant, but it felt familiar the moment I stepped through the door. I knew it was mine. I submitted an offer, and a few nerve-wracking days later, it was accepted. I can't even explain how fantastic it felt. For the first time in my life, I was doing something solely for myself, with no influence from anyone. Of course, I did not inform my family. I decided to let them keep delivering their helpful suggestions while I silently moved forward. But then my mom called me out of nowhere and asked, "We're having dinner next weekend. Are you coming?" I nearly said no, but then I had a thought. You know what? Let's get this over with. So I'm going to this dinner, and I already know what it will be like. They'll probably have a full PowerPoint presentation prepared. This is the fun part. I'm about to reveal that I've already acquired a house. I am not going to sugarcoat it either. I can already hear theatrical gasps and complaints. Thank you for sticking around. I'll update you after dinner. Update 1. Hello again, Reddit. First and foremost, I'd like to thank everyone who commented and offered advice on my previous article. I've read the majority of them, and they've been both informative and entertaining. Many of you expressed surprise at how entitled my family sounds, and believe me, I share your sentiments. Others shared their experiences with similar situations, and it's reassuring to know I'm not alone. Anyway, I promised you an update after supper, so here we go. Buckle up, because this was a lot. So, I arrived at my folks' house last Saturday at precisely 6 p.m., attempting to mentally prepare for whatever garbage they were about to hurl at me. The moment I went in, there was already commotion. Ella's kids were screaming, Josh was sitting on the couch watching TV, and my mother was hurrying around the kitchen. She looked over and said, "Oh good, you're on time for once. We are off to a good start, right?" We sat down for supper, and the conversation began with the normal small talk. Dad complained about gas prices, Josh vented about something at work, while Ella complained about how difficult it is to manage 3 children. Daniel keeps waking up in the middle of the night, she explained, scooping mashed potatoes onto her plate. We're just so cramped. I feel like I'm losing my mind. I knew where this was going, but I played along by nodding compassionately while concentrating on my lasagna. My mother then cleared her throat, as she does when she is about to make an announcement. Charlotte, she added with a huge smile. We've been talking, and we think we found the perfect house for you. I almost choked on my water. Of course, they'd arrive with a plan. Oh, I asked, keeping my tone as neutral as possible. Yes, Ella chimed in. It's a beautiful place, and it's only a few blocks from us. It has 5 bedrooms, a huge yard for the kids, and even a guest suite. Mom interrupted before I could respond. It's perfect for everyone. There's enough space for the kids to finally have their own rooms, and Josh could even set up an office. Plus, it's in such a great neighborhood, close to good schools. I just stared at them, bewildered. They weren't even pretending it was about me anymore. So, Ella replied, beaming as if everything was settled. We can go see it tomorrow if you want. That's when I decided I'd had it. Actually, I responded, setting down my fork. I've already bought a house. The room went completely silent. Even the children stopped making noise. What? Mom asked, her voice harsh. I bought a house, I reiterated. It's a small, 2-bedroom cottage just outside the city. It's perfect for me. For a little moment, I considered whether they would be pleased with me. Mom's face turned red, and Ella's mouth virtually dropped to the floor. A cottage? Ella finally asked, her tone full of skepticism. How are we supposed to fit in a cottage? You're not, I responded, because it's my house. I bought it for myself. Mom stepped in before Ella could react. Charlotte, how could you make such a big decision without consulting us? We've been working so hard to find the perfect place for you. No, I replied, trying to maintain my cool. You've been working hard to find the perfect place for Ella and her family. I didn't need your help. I knew what I wanted, and I bought it. Ella's voice became quite high-pitched, as if she were about to cry. But we need this, Charlotte. Do you know how hard it is for us in that tiny apartment? Emily and Mason have to share a room, and Daniel's crib is in our bedroom. It's not fair to the kids. I took a deep breath and tried not to snap. That's not my problem, Ella. I've worked hard to get to this point, and I'm not giving up my dream house to fix your situation. That's when Dad decided to join in. He smashed his hand onto the table and yelled, You're being selfish, Charlotte. Family is supposed to help each other. What's wrong with you? I stood up, my heart racing. I'm not selfish. I'm finally standing up for myself. And if that makes me the bad guy in your eyes, so be it. The place erupted into turmoil. Ella was crying. Mom was ranting about how she had raised me better. Dad was complaining about how dissatisfied he was. Josh sat there stuffing food into his mouth as if nothing was occurring. I grabbed my handbag and went to the door. Mom followed me and shouted, You can't just walk away from your family like this. I turned back to say, Watch me. Then I got into my car and drove home, shivering with wrath and relief. I feel like I've finally spoken up, but now I'm bracing for the consequences. So that's where things are. I will let you know what happens. Next, thank you for your continued support. You don't realize how much it's helped. Update 2 Hello again, Reddit. Thank you so much for all of your support and comments following my last update. I wasn't expecting such a show of support, and it's honestly helped me preserve my sanity. Many of you were correct. I should have seen this coming. After that evening, things went just as I had dreaded. So here's an update. Ella sent the first SMS that night. It was simply a photo of her children lounging on their couch, surrounded by toys, with the caption, Look how cramped we are. Do you think this is fair to Emily and Mason? I didn't respond. What was I supposed to say? That it was somehow my fault that her place was a mess? That buying a property for myself had somehow resulted in her children sharing a room? I turned my phone to silent and went to bed, hoping she would let it go. She did not. The next morning, I awoke to 5 missed calls from my mother and a flurry of texts from Ella. One commented, You always think about yourself. I thought family mattered to you. Another stated, Mom is so upset. She couldn't even sleep last night. Finally, the piece de resistance. You've changed, Charlotte. This isn't the sister I grew up with. Right, because the sibling she grew up with was too busy being ignored to develop a spine. I resolved to disregard it all and concentrate on my work, but the texts did not cease. Every several hours, my mother would join in with her own gems. You're being so selfish, Charlotte. We're all disappointed in you. I hope you realize what you're doing to Ella's kids. You need to reconsider. It's not too late to sell the house and buy something better suited for the family. I silenced each of them, but they then began leaving voicemails. It was the same guilt-ridden babble, but hearing their voices made it more impactful. Mom seemed Genuinely angry, Ella sounded like she was about to cry, and at one point, my father called and shouted at me for 5 minutes about how I was ripping the family apart. It did not stop there. A few days later, I received a call from my aunt, whom I hadn't spoken to in years. She said, "I heard about what's going on with Ella. Can't you find it in your heart to help? Family comes first, Charlotte." I had to laugh. This was the same aunt who hardly acknowledged my existence growing up, and now she wants to lecture me on family? I told her I wasn't talking about it, and hung up. Then came the Facebook posts. Ella shared a photo of her kids squished close on their bunk bed with the caption, "All they want is a little space to grow, but I guess some people think family isn't worth helping anymore." The comments were filled with sympathy from her pals who had no idea what was going on. Things like, "You're such a great mom. Whoever's letting you down doesn't deserve you. Also, how could anyone leave you guys in that situation?" I wanted to shout. She made me out to be the villain, and I couldn't even defend myself without becoming petty. So I kept silent and continued scrolling. But then my mother put something on her own page. She posted a photo of my residence. I don't know how she acquired it, with this caption, "It's so sad when someone forgets where they came from. Family sacrifices so much for you, and this is how they repay you." I blocked both of them right away, but not before a coworker messaged me to ask what was going on. Lisa, yes, that Lisa, appears to have read the message and was discussing it at work. Now half of the staff assumed I had abandoned my family to live alone in a mansion. For the record, my home is only a cottage, not exactly lifestyles of the rich and famous. The stress was beginning to get to me. Every time my phone vibrated, I felt a rush of fear. I stopped using social media and ignored my email. Even when I was working, I couldn't concentrate because I was anticipating the next call or message. Ella unexpectedly showed up at my flat one evening, bringing things to a new low. I opened the door to see her standing there with Daniel on her hip and the other 2 kids in tow. She was fatigued, and the children were all weeping or whining about something. "Charlotte," she exclaimed, her voice cracking, "we need to talk." I crossed my arms and stood in the doorway, preventing them from entering. "What do you want, Ella?" "Please," she pleaded with tears in her eyes. "We don't have anywhere else to go. The landlord's raising our rent again, and we can't afford it. Just let us stay with you for a little while. The kids need stability." I felt my heart fall, but I remained tough. "Ella, I'm sorry you're struggling, but my house isn't an option. It's not big enough, and honestly, this isn't my responsibility." She looked at me as if I just kicked her puppy. "So that's it. You're just going to let us suffer." "I'm not letting you suffer. I've worked hard to get where I am, and I'm not going to let you guilt me into giving it all up." She murmured something under her breath, then turned and stomped away, her children trailing behind. I shut the door and leaned against it, feeling both guilty and relieved. My mother called the next morning and told me I was callous for turning Ella away. She scolded me for being cold and ungrateful and warned that I might come to regret it eventually. I hung up without saying anything. Even as I write this essay, their SMS keeps flashing up on my phone. Mom is sending walls of guilt-ridden paragraphs, while Ella is sending images of her children. I even received a voicemail from Dad just now that began with, "I hope you're happy," and I didn't care to listen to the rest. I cannot take it any longer. The first thing I'll do tomorrow morning is change my phone number and give it exclusively to trusted friends and coworkers. It is evident that they will not stop unless I entirely cut them off. I'll deal with social media later, increasing my privacy settings and blocking anyone who might try to stir the pot. One thing at a time. I will notify you once I have completed everything. Thank you for all of your comments and support. It's truly helping me get through this situation. Update 3. Hello Reddit. I am back with another update. So I've been reading over your comments, and wow, you guys didn't hold back. A lot of you were upset with me for not blocking my family sooner, and you were correct. After changing my phone number, I banned them from everything. Facebook, Instagram, even casual relatives who may have attempted to intervene. It was great to finally cut them off, but as expected, things quickly became chaotic again. I should have realized that the peace would not endure. It all started last weekend when my mother showed up uninvited at my place. I was in the backyard trying to figure out how to plant lavender. Google makes it look so simple, but I've already killed 3 plants when I heard a knock on the front door. At first, I assumed it was my neighbor or a delivery boy, but when I got to the door, there she was, my mother, standing on my porch with a pie in her hands and the fakest smile I'd ever seen. "Hi, Charlotte," she said, as if she had just dropped by for a casual visit and not after weeks of me disappearing. Hi," I answered, quite taken aback. I stood there for a second, contemplating whether I should even let her in, but she thrust the pie at me and shouted, "I thought I'd stop by and see how you're doing. I brought your favorite apple." I wasn't sure whether to laugh or cry. My favorite is cherry, but that's good. Mom, against my better judgment, I allowed her in. I did not want to cause a scene. She placed the pie on the counter and gazed about the home as if she were taking inventory. This is lovely, Charlotte, she commented, sliding her hand along the back of a chair. You've done a great job. I had no idea what to say, so I simply mumbled a brief thank you and waited for her to get to the point. She sat down at my kitchen table and sighed deeply. I wanted to apologize, she explained. Things got a little heated, and I realize now that we were wrong to push you like that. You've worked hard for this house, and I should have respected your decisions. I stared at her, trying to determine whether she was serious. It seemed good on the surface, but something about her tone didn't sit well with me. Then she launched into a lengthy speech about how pleased she was of me and how the stress of Ella's condition had caused everyone to behave out. But that's no excuse, she added, giving me a sad, almost begging expression. For a little moment, I felt myself melting. Maybe she was genuinely attempting to make things right. But then she smacked me with, I was thinking maybe we could have a fresh start. I'd love to come over again sometime. Maybe bring Ella and the kids. It'd be nice for everyone to see your new place. So there it was. I attempted to maintain my cool. I don't think that's a good idea right now, I answered, carefully selecting my words. Things are still a little tense, and I'm not ready for that yet. She nodded, but I could see she was not pleased with my response. Of course, I understand, she murmured, but her grin was a bit too tight, and her gaze darted around the room as if she was assessing the situation. Following a few minutes of light conversation, she stood up and remarked, well, I should get going. Thanks for letting me stop by. I really mean it, Charlotte. I just want us to be a family again. I nodded without saying anything. When she went, I shut the door and stood there for a long time, staring at the pie on the counter. Something about the entire encounter seemed wrong. For the previous few days, I couldn't stop thinking about the talk. Was she being real, or was this another form of manipulation? The timing seemed far too convenient. After bothering me for weeks, she abruptly apologized and offered me a pie. It also didn't sit well with me how fast she dismissed everything that had transpired. She did not mention the messages, voicemails, or the fact that I had blocked her. It was as if she was pretending none of it ever happened, which felt strange. What about bringing Ella and the kids over? That did not seem like a casual suggestion. It felt calculated, as if she was testing the waters to see how much I would let go. I haven't contacted her since, and she hasn't contacted me back either. But I can't get the sensation that this isn't finished. Knowing my family, there's probably something else going on, and I'm just waiting for the other shoe to drop. What are your thoughts, Reddit? Was my mother being sincere, or is there more to this than she is letting on? Part of me wants to believe she's sincerely attempting to repair things, but another part of me thinks I'd be an idiot to trust her. Update 4. Hello, Reddit. I am back, and gosh, do I have an update for you. Hopefully the final one. I wish I could say things had settled down, but everything has gone from somewhat irritating to really wild. I'm not sure where to begin, but let's just say I've officially stopped giving my family the benefit of the doubt. So, remember how my mother swung by with an apology and a pie? At the time, I told everyone I had a bad feeling about it. It turns out my instincts were correct. Something about her visit didn't sit right with me, and I couldn't figure out why. She looked way too concerned in every element of my residence, from the door locks to the room arrangement. At the time, I dismissed it as her being nosy. However, I now see it was part of a larger plan. A few days following her visit, I resumed my normal routine. Work was hectic, so I spent most of my time holed up in my new home office, focusing on deadlines. I wasn't really thinking about my family. Things had been quiet since the visit, and I wondered whether they were finally backing off. Then came Saturday. I'd gone out to run errands in the morning. The usual stuff: grocery shopping, a trip to Target, and picking up a package at the post office. I arrived home around noon, bags in hand, ready to put everything away and have a relaxing weekend. As I drove into the driveway, I noticed something odd. Ella's SUV was parked directly in front of my house. My heart sank immediately. I approached the door, fumbling with my keys, and heard voices inside. At first, I assumed I had left a window open or my TV turned on, but as I stepped into the entryway, the realization hit me like a brick. Ella, Josh, and the kids were at my house. The scene inside was complete chaos. Emily and Mason were sprawled out on my couch, surrounded by snacks and toys that were not their own. Daniel was toddling about the living room, chewing on one of my throw pillows as if it were a teething toy. Josh was in the kitchen, looting my refrigerator, and Ella was in the sunroom, rearranging my furnishings as if she were on HGTV. What the hell is going on? I asked, my voice quivering with rage and confusion. Ella looked up, unaffected. Oh hey Charlotte. We figured it'd be easier to just move in while you were out. I glanced at her, trying to understand what she had just said. Move in? Are you serious? She rolled her eyes as if I were the one acting ridiculous. Mom gave us the key, she said. It'd be fine. I felt like I was about to explode. Mom gave you what key? The spare key, she added, pointing to the kitchen counter where I had left it during Mom's stay. We really needed the space, and your house is perfect for us. It could have been bigger if you'd listened to us, but it'll do, and Josh can finally have an office. Get out, I murmured, my voice dangerously calm. Charlotte, don't be like that, Josh interjected, leaning against my fridge with a sandwich. You're single. You don't need all this space. This house makes way more sense for us. I couldn't believe what I heard. They were talking about my house as if it were just another handout from my parents for Ella. Get out of my house, I repeated, louder this time. Ella scoffed. We're family, Charlotte. Stop being so dramatic. We've already started settling in, and the kids love it here. It's not like you're using all this space anyway. I didn't know how to answer. I was so enraged that I couldn't think clearly. Instead of arguing, I took out my phone and dialed 911. Seriously, Ella? You're calling the cops on your own family. Watch me, I said, holding up the phone for her to see. When the dispatcher answered, I gently stated the situation. My sister and her family had broken into my home and refused to leave. Ella and Josh attempted to argue with me while I was on the phone, but I ignored them. By the time the cops arrived, I was shivering from adrenaline, but I was also determined not to let them get away with it. The cops were professional but firm. They questioned Ella and Josh why they were in the house, and their explanation was as ludicrous as you'd imagine. We're family, Ella stated, as if it were a solid legal argument. Josh kept saying I had plenty of space, and it was the right thing to do. The officers wouldn't have it. They informed Ella and Josh that they were trespassing and that they should leave immediately. Ella burst into tears, claiming she had no idea it was such a huge issue, and Josh muttered something about my being selfish. I remained silent during the incident, letting the officers handle it. It was rather nice to see Ella and Josh pick up their belongings, including the food they had grabbed from my pantry, and shuffle out the door. After they went, one of the officers approached me and asked if I wanted to file charges. I considered it briefly, but honestly, all I wanted was for them to leave. I told the officer that I did not want to seek charges as long as they stayed away from my property. He nodded and promised to file a report if anything else happened. After they left, I locked the door and stood there for a bit, taking everything in. My house felt different suddenly, almost like it had been defiled. The thought of them just letting themselves in without asking, without caring how I felt, made my skin crawl. I've already phoned a locksmith to change all of the locks, and I'm considering adding a security system as well. I am done giving them the benefit of the doubt. This was not a misunderstanding or an act of desperation. This was entitlement, plain and simple. I'm still struggling to process the reality that my own sister believed this was okay, and the fact that my mother gave them the key. I don't even have words for it yet. I called my lawyer this morning, explained the scenario, and he drafted and sent a formal cease and desist letter to my mother, Ella, and Josh. The letter explained what they had done and stated unequivocally that if they continued to harass me, I would not hesitate to seek legal action. Anyway, that's where things stand right now. I'm still outraged, but I'm also feeling numb. Part of me wonders if this is truly over, or if they'll attempt anything again. Thank you again to everyone who has followed and supported me during this wild adventure. Your wisdom, validation, and sometimes tough love have meant more to me than I can express. Take care, Reddit.